Welcome to Law and Life, the Leverance Approach.
Welcome back to Law and Life, the Leverance Approach with attorney Yonatan Levoritz. Yoni is the founder of Leverance Law Firm and is recognized for his exceptional skill in family law, his compassionate manner, and his commitment to achieving favorable outcomes for his clients. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and in today's episode, we're talking about hidden assets in a New York divorce and the financial structures that can complicate discovery. Yoni, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So what are some early indicators that assets may not be fully disclosed?
Well, early indicators are the fact that sometimes you don't have a match between the assets that you know about, because sometimes you know about certain assets that exist, and the assets that appear on what's called the affidavit of net worth. So, for example, in a recent case, the gentleman owns, I'd say, probably around 10 or 15 pieces of property. Some of those properties are not listed on his net worth statement. Some of the properties, we don't know where they are or what they are. Some of the properties are identifiable, okay, not only because of the net worth, but because the wife knows that they exist. Therefore, we can actually track them down and trace them. It's very complicated, but it's very interesting work because you get to put together a puzzle where the other side is fighting you tooth and nail to avoid having to disclose the assets.
It's a competitive puzzle.
It's a very competitive puzzle, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
We use a lot of subpoenas to find these assets. We search through bank records and comb through them, looking for transfers to other places, other businesses, other assets, other business names. People don't realize that when you're dealing with certain assets, I should say companies in general, you deal with them in a certain way on your tax return. For example, you have a Schedule E on your tax return, which would show your real estate holdings, if they're held via a sole proprietorship or an LLC, which is a pass-through entity. If it's an LLC formed as a different manner, or if it's a subchapter S corporation, you will not see it on the tax return. Therefore, the tax return is not going to be very helpful to you. But bank statements or mortgage statements or home lines of equity that may give you clues as to where the money was transferred or used is what's going to help you identify those hidden assets.
Okay. So in high asset divorces, what types of financial structures tend to create the most confusion?
The types of structures that cause the greatest amount of confusion are trusts, which are based upon separate tax returns, separate assets, separate transfers. Subchapter S corporations, which are based upon separate structures, separate tax returns, separate assets. And of course, then you have assets that are actually hidden in other people's names, such as your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, and assets that have been deliberately transferred over the years to avoid having to deal with them in a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things have different intricacies to them.
And sometimes you can be dealing with multiple different entities, I would imagine.
Oh, yes. And that's horribly complicated. But at the same time, it's also very challenging and exciting.
Yeah. Is it difficult for perhaps a spouse to try to document and disclose assets when those assets are spread across multiple entities or accounts?
It's very difficult for the non-owner to prove those particular assets. Yes, yeah. It's very complicated. But on the flip side of that, the punishment for not disclosing the assets can be equally as high for the person who's not disclosing the assets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, therefore, people who get involved in, let's say, an asset protection plan, and they put assets into the asset protection plan, or if it's an offshore asset protection plan that's based upon multiple trusts or multiple LLCs or multiple corporations, you put yourself in a position where if you don't declare these things, and then we finally prove them via discovery that they exist, and we find the initial checks or the initial transfers or the initial assets that went into them, the court is going to punish them for not disclosing them.
What is the punishment?
The punishment typically is, depending upon the judge, of course, is what's called a preclusion order. A preclusion order could be one of three things. One, your pleadings are stricken, meaning you don't have a right to seek certain relief. Two, the second punishment could be that everything the other side says is true.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
Yes, automatically. Whatever they say, it's just true. Okay. The third thing is that you're barred from participating in trial and offering any defense.
Wow. Okay, so serious
Of course, there are
consequences.
counsel fees.
Hmm.
Serious consequences.
Yeah. So let's talk about the trust for a bit. What factors determine whether the trust is considered marital property, separate property, or something that still affects the overall financial picture?
The main factor is whether or not the property that went into it was marital in nature. So if you have a 20 or a 30-year marriage and you have a husband who's fully in control of the assets under this hypothetical, and the husband goes ahead and puts money into these things 20 years ago, 15 years ago, past the time when you can get bank records necessarily, okay, because banks only hold on to records typically for 7 years,
Right.
you have a lot of digging to do.
Hmm.
And that impacts whether or not you're going to be able to bring it into the marital estate and whether or not you're going to be able to prove the value of it as part of your case.
Hmm. So with LLCs, obviously they can be used for business ownership, but also for real estate. In a divorce, why is tracing value through an LLC challenging? What makes it challenging?
Finding the LLC that exists is normally the most challenging thing because if it's not a pass-through entity, if it's taxed like some other types of entities, okay, more like a corporation, more like a subchapter S, if it's taxed in a way that it's not going to appear on your tax return, or the LLC is in somebody else's name and therefore is not appearing on your tax return, but it's appearing on your sister's or your father's tax returns, okay, it's harder to bring into the marital estate in terms of ownership, in terms of the parties. The court doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over them. You have to go ahead and fight these different issues.
What sort of evidence do you look for, to evaluate whether something has perhaps been underreported or structured to look less valuable than it is?
Then we rely on forensic accountants and real estate appraisers or art appraisers or whatever the asset may be. Art is a big one.
Okay. Interesting. Art. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. My mind wouldn't have gone there, but that makes sense.
Yeah, no, art's a big one. People are constantly trying to depreciate the value of their art in terms of what they own, and it doesn't go on your tax return. So it's a matter of where it's stored, how it's stored. Do you have proof? Can you find the storage unit where it's kept? Can you find the art depot where it's kept? Is it overseas? Is it here? Art's complicated.
Wow, it's so funny. I mean, I never would have expected that to be a complex part of a divorce proceeding.
Sure. And the experts are expensive.
I'll bet. An art
Yes.
expert? You have to you have to value a piece of art. I bet.
Art experts are expensive.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
So when a spouse controls a business, how do questions about compensation, distributions, or perhaps delayed income usually surface during discovery?
That's a multi-part question. So let's try and break it down a little bit.
Okay.
A business itself is valued based upon a multiple of cash flow, and it's also based upon a discounted value taking into account how much the person would have earned at their regular job. So let's say, for example, you're a doctor, okay, or yeah, let's use doctors because they have decent compensations. They open up their own practice and they're generating $600,000 a year, okay, and that's their net income after paying all their expenses and everything else. The excess value to the business is probably zero or close to zero because it's about what they would have made as a doctor working for somebody else or working in a different company or working for a hospital. So that's one situation. Another situation is where you have a person who owns lots of real estate, okay, and they're a real estate investor, a real estate developer. Then you have more issues because you have depreciation on the real estate, which is a phantom expense. You also have costs of goods sold, okay, in terms of real estate developers. Typically, people increase their costs of goods sold to decrease their income, okay? Same thing happens with store owners. Same thing happens with any type of retail business or wholesale business. You increase your cost of goods sold, you decrease your net income looks lower. You then have to look at the actual invoices for what they purchased or their bank statements for what they purchased. Say, hey, your general ledger, okay, or your taxes do not match up to your invoices in terms of what you actually purchased. Therefore, your cost of goods sold was actually much lower, making the value of the business much higher, okay, and therefore you trap them into that particular position.
Wow. So you're going through like their invoices and all that stuff and matching it up to what they claim their expenses were or their cost of goods were?
In large part, yes, in many cases.
Wow, that's a painstaking process, I would imagine.
It is a painstaking part of the puzzle.
Part of the puzzle, yeah. But I can see how it's sort of satisfying at the same time. Like you said, it's kind of fun or it's kind of enjoyable to like, like kind of a sleuth, right? You're kind of trying to figure all this stuff out.
When you find someone who didn't declare millions of dollars in income, you feel like you hit the lottery.
Yeah. So did your client.
Literally, that's how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you handled situations where the structure itself, like a trust or LLC or financial vehicle, kind of made it harder to understand what was actually available for distribution?
Yes, you see that, but the trusts are extremely complicated. Many of them are generation skipping trusts, okay, which I'm not going to get into, but it's a very complicated type of trust. Many of them are trusts that spin off income, okay, and the amount of income they spin off is not necessarily what the parties were living on during the course of their marriage. So the hypothetical would be as follows. You have your father created a trust, okay? Your father put $10 million into this trust. $10 million should generate, let's say, $1.5 million, $2 million a year in distributions, right? So you take the distributions and you look at them, and then you take a look at the fact that from those distributions, the trust is only paying out to them, instead of $1 million, $1.5 million, it's paying out $500,000. So the trust is developing a larger fund to go ahead and work with. So what is actually subject to distribution? The excess earnings of the trust or the amount the person is collecting on the trust?
Oh, wow.
In most cases, it's what the person was actually being distributed.
Okay.
Because that was their actual income. Okay, so the trust is not necessarily valued because the trust is actually separate property. The father created it.
Right.
It's a third-party gift. Okay, so it's not marital property. It's not marital property spinning off these earnings. So it makes it very interesting in that sense.
And complicated, as you said.
And complicated because you have very, very large trusts.
Mm-hmm. Is this, as a general rule, is hiding assets fairly common?
Underreporting income is extremely common. Hiding assets is, relatively speaking, common.
Okay. Okay.
You
So,
know,
so just the
especially
manipulation of the numbers is what you see more than anything.
Oh, yes.
All right.
You know,
That's why you got to get a lawyer, right, Yoni?
absolutely. Without a lawyer, you're not going to be able to do any of this or figure it all out.
Right. Yeah. Awesome stuff. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Law and Life, the Leverance Approach. To contact Yoni or learn more, leveritzlaw.com. And for more insights on navigating divorce and family law in New York, be sure to subscribe to our channel and share the episodes with others so they can find trustworthy guidance when they need it most. Yoni, it's always great chatting with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.